Believe it or not, if you do any Flash Reflex work, you already have the SDK installed in your machine. It's just probably tucked away in your program files folder for Flash Builder or installed with FDT or whatever you use. But if you want to download it separately, you can grab it from this page and just extract the zip to anywhere you want to download it to. So once you've done that, the extracted zip will look something like this. A bunch of licensing crap that no one ever reads, and some folders that don't really make too much sense at first sight. Well, maybe ASDoc and frameworks and runtimes, but let's jump into the stuff you already use and you don't even know it. So the bin folder. There's a bunch of executable or applications in here, ASDoc, compc, copy locale. But the one we're going to look at first is MXMLC. MXMLC is the compiler. MXML standing for absolutely nothing for no reason, and C standing for compiler as far as I know. So what I have here to demonstrate this is a file called sandbox, which is an ActionScript file that looks just like this. So it's drawing a red square. So if I open the command line, and I type mxmlc sandbox and I hit enter, this is going to compile my sandbox ActionScript class into a SWIF. Voila, a wonderful SWIF. You actually use this all the time. It just runs behind the scenes and you don't even know it. The compiler actually takes quite a few different arguments which are already configured for you. So just to show you how you can change those arguments, it'd be something like default background color equals, let's say, green, and hit enter. And this time when it's done compiling, you can see that the background color is green and it has a red square. Now the default configuration is actually something not many people know about, and it's hidden away in your frameworks folder. It's actually this flex config, and if you open this up, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff in here. And this is used by default. You'll see targets 10.0. It's accessible. It uses the English locale. Has a bunch of things you may be familiar with if you've set these things within your panels in Flash Builder or other IDEs. And when you set it in your IDE, it overrides these specific properties. And there's actually I believe it's at the bottom, a bunch of metadata that you can add for your specific SWIF. So believe it or not, if you've never touched this before, all of your SWIFs actually have this metadata compiled into it. So forging ahead, the next thing that you probably use that you don't even know about is back in the bin folder. And this time, this is the debugger. So if we come into here and we say trace hello debugger, and we save this guy out, we can actually open this debugger. We can say run, and it'll say waiting for the player to connect. So let's go into our MXMLC with command line. We will say MXMLC sandbox and debug is true. Hit enter, compiled our SWIF, and now make sure you can see the debugger when we open this. So we're going to do a little bit of window management here so you can see everything. So here's the debug flash player. Here's my SWIF. I drag this onto the debug flash player to make sure it launches with the debug flash player. You can see the debug session has started and it asks you to set breakpoints. I'm not going to do that because frankly I don't use the debugger that way, and it's also kind of out of the scope of this. But if you type help and hit enter, it'll show you a bunch of the commands you can use. Anyway, I'm just going to type continue here, and you can see it says hello debugger because that's what we told it to trace out to. When I close this, it'll say player session terminated. All right, so from there on out, we have a few more little tools in here. ASDoc is the one that will generate the documentation if you write ASDoc comments in your project. Comp.c is what actually generates SWICs. So you point that to a source folder and tell it to include everything, and it'll generate a SWIC for you. Copy Locale is a tool that will take your location properties and add additional ones other than just English. Digest will generate the files that are in the SWICs that say what's included. Flex compiler shell, FCSH, is actually a way to incrementally build your Swifts. The debugger, the compiler, the optimizer will actually strip out debugging info from a SWIC. SWIC depends, I believe that generates or makes a list of all the dependencies that are in your SWIC file. And Swift dump will actually disassemble your Swift into the bytecode so you can read what it's all about. It's not a decompiler, so you won't see ActionScript or anything. It's a disassembler, so you'll see bytecode. All right, so going back into the root of the SDK, other things you probably use in here are in the frameworks, and you go into the projects, and you can see all the different source code. While you may not use the source code directly, you can always access it in there. But if you jump back into the root and you look under lib, it is under frameworks, under libs, you can see the different SWICs. The one SWIC that everyone uses, whether you like it or not, is under here, called the player global SWIC. That has sprite and text field and all the wonderful little classes that come with Flash Player. Besides that, the compiled libs are things like Flex, which has the module loading stuff. It has classes like bitmap asset for embedding assets. There's the actual framework, and yes, it is that big. That has the button classes, panel classes, all the different framework stuff. And from there on out, you have, your Spark components, your text layout, your skins, utilities, OSMF, video player. Flash integration lets you use, it's like UI movie clip, lets you use the Flex components with Flash and the data viz stuff. And then from there, a lot of the stuff, samples, templates, samples and templates are just some Air stuff you can use. Ant has the build to actually build all the SWICs. And let's see, is there anything else to cover in here? We have runtimes. You can always come in here and grab your Flash Player runtimes. And that is about it. So that is the Flex SDK, all the tools you need to start working with Flex. This is how a lot of people work. If they don't use something like Flash Builder or FDT or IntelliJ or any of those that point to this SDK for you, they'll set up their own projects, write their code in Vim or Emacs or whatever text editor, and just start pointing to the SDK and calling the different tasks as needed. So hope that explained it well enough, and have fun.